Hi, I'm Keap Mask, and on the Conquer the Chaos podcast, I talk with inspiring business owners about what it takes to build a great business and a great life. That means more money, more time, more control, more impact, more freedom. So keep listening to hear the tough lessons they learned so you don't have to repeat them. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Conquer the Chaos podcast. I'm Keap Mask, co-founder and CEO of Keap, and your host of the Conquer the Chaos podcast. And today we are going to talk about leadership. We're going to talk about rhythm. We're going to talk about two keys of success for entrepreneurs with a guest of mine that I'm really excited to introduce you to, because Layne Gneiting is with us today. Layne, thank you for being with us. I'm going to give an intro in just a second, but really appreciate you being here.
I'm excited to be here with you, Clayt.
Well, thank you. It is awesome. It's going to be a lot of fun. Layne is someone that I've known for, over a decade now. He's worked with many of our leaders here at Keap over the years. He's a leadership expert, a leadership guru, I would say, and he's seen leadership from many different perspectives. And when I think about leadership as a key to success for entrepreneurs, as I cover in Conquer the Chaos, there are so many different aspects of leadership. There's so many different dimensions. And then when you introduce the size of the business, if you're a solopreneur, 5-person, 10-person, 25, 50, 100 people, the leadership role changes pretty significantly. But there are certain things that apply in leadership to everybody. And we're going to talk about some of those things today. We're also going to talk a little bit about rhythm and about a principle that Layne talks about called flow. And we're going to talk about that because this is something, Layne, I don't know if you know this, but many years ago when you were working with Hal Halliday, some of our listeners know Hal. He was our chief people officer, and he would talk a lot about flow. And so we're going to talk about that. I want to give you a chance to share your wisdom and your experience and what you've observed in entrepreneurs and what we do and don't do to take advantage of that state of flow and how we can benefit from that. So without further ado, let me introduce Layne Gneiting. Layne is a leadership expert. He is someone who has a pretty interesting take on leadership. And one of the things that Layne does to strengthen leadership characteristics and capabilities is he leads people on cycling trips and helps them to discover principles of leadership through those trips. Some of our people have been on those trips. I've never had the privilege of going on one of those trips, but I've heard all about it from many of our people. And so I'm looking forward to talking about some of those principles, Layne, that you've discovered. Why don't you take just a second and tell our listeners a little bit more about who you are and what you do, and then let's get into some of the principles of leadership that we want to cover today.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Clayt. And I got to tell you, it's just fantastic to be with you. My name is Layne Gneiting. I have a doctorate in communication and taught leadership and communication at Arizona State University. And I did that for about 20 years, but I felt a deeper call, and that was to adventure. And I took a big risk. It seemed impossible, absolutely impossible. I was married, 7 kids, job, mortgage, student debt, all the stuff.
Coming from academia as well. I mean, this is like a pretty big shift that you made.
This is a massive shift, but what I wanted to do more than anything on the planet, like more than breath, I wanted to bike across America. And when I did that, it blew my mind out of into a whole new stratosphere of what's possible. And it helped me realize more about myself, about other people, about teamwork. And really, it allowed me to feel the heartbeat of a country. And I thought, I want people to experience this.
Wow.
Because it awakens them to possibilities they didn't even entertain.
So let me just get this straight. You've been a professor for 20 years at Arizona State. You got 7 kids. You tell your wife, adventure is calling, hun. I want to go right across the country on my bike. What did she say?
She said, well, let's figure it out.
That's pretty amazing.
And one of the key principles we'll talk about in a minute, I was sitting around with good friends, Clayt, good friends. And this was back, this was like early 2000s, like 2006 or so.
Okay.
And I finally voiced this dream to friends. And one of them said, Layne, that's despicable. I can't believe you would do that. That if you would abandon your family and go on a pleasure jaunt like this, you are not a man in my book.
Wow.
And I wanted to be a man. I wanted to believe her story. And so I shelved the dream and quit doing it. And then 3 years later, some things happened and Gayleen and I said, we got to make it happen. How are we going to do it? Let's take the family, load them up in an old motorhome, hit the road.
Wow. So you go on this cross-country trek, your family's in a motorhome, and you're riding a bike. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's amazing. So what did you learn? You said it woke you up. You saw the country, but what was it and then you said you wanted people to have this awakening as well. What was it? What occurred for you during that trip?
Well, there were two things. There was internal and external. Internally, I realized I was an angry, entitled jackass. And I had no idea. I could not see it. To me, everybody else that got in my way, they were the jerks.
Uh-huh.
And that just slipped away. So it helped me realize I don't have to be angry. I don't have to try to force things. I can allow, and that's a key term, I can allow them instead of constantly pushing for them.
Okay. So let's get to this point of allowing. I think we're starting to get to this flow concept, but I want to take a second because in entrepreneurship, there's a really tricky art because we are creating something, we're making something happen that isn't going to happen without us imposing our will to a certain extent. There's a certain, I was talking to an entrepreneur the other day and I said, he said, hey, you gave me some advice at one point when we were really struggling to get the business going. And I said, hey, you're going to need to will it into existence. And I believe there's a certain creation that we have to do in our mind, and then we go to work to make that happen when as entrepreneurs, all the forces are telling us that can't be, it's not true, why are you trying that, don't do that. And so there's a certain amount of willpower that it's required in entrepreneurship. But the art is, if we're not careful, that willpower is very easily blurred into force. It's very easily blurred into anger, into displeasure with all of the forces of the economy that might be at odds with what you're trying to do. And so what I'm trying to get at is, I believe for entrepreneurs, there is a creative power that does require will and does require imposing that will, but there's also a working with what is that sometimes can come in at odds with this will and trying to make things happen. And I think you're on it when you're talking about, a little bit of anger and a little bit of people being in our way instead of being part of the way. And I'm just wondering, what do you see in what you learned as a leader on a bike or going across America that woke you up, that would help in this delicate art, this dance that we do as entrepreneurs as we try to create the business of our dreams?
Is it okay if I answer with an analogy?
Please.
Okay. Clayt, man, this is just such a fantastic analogy. I wish I could claim it. But, centuries ago, it said there's a time and a season for all things.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about the farmers, now I grew up in Idaho, farming community, and so I observed the rotation of the seasons and the cycle of the actions that occurred. And there was something pretty profound that was revealed to me. And that is that none of us, I don't care who you are, you could be president of the world, and you cannot force any plant to grow. You can't. Instead, what you can do is create the conditions for that plant to grow. Now, I think about the seed as a dream. And if you drop a dream onto hard ground, like it might grow some roots, but it's not going to flourish.
Mm-hmm.
Your job is to select the right dream, and then you've got to disrupt your world. That's what they do. When the farmer comes in with the plow, they completely churn up the ground, like 2 feet is upended. And if you don't do that, you're not able to fully allow that dream or that seed to thrive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think too many of us, we stay the course and we don't allow ourselves to disrupt our identities.
So what you're saying is an entrepreneur who's got a dream has got to create the conditions for that dream or that seed to grow and flourish. They can't make it happen. They can't water that seed, protect that seed. They can't make it grow. And that's a really interesting thing, that we create the conditions for this business to grow. Mm-hmm. But there's a certain amount of allowing that needs to occur. And
yes,
that allowing is something that sometimes goes counter to the nature of entrepreneurship, the nature of human beings, where we're trying to make something happen, especially ambitious, type A, driven individuals who want to make things happen, right? And I say all the time, make it a great day, make things happen. But there's making in terms of creating conditions, and then there's a certain allowing. Talk to us about the allowing. What did you learn? In your cycling across the country? Where does the creating the conditions end and the allowing for the flourishing to occur? Where does that start?
Well, there's a certain energy that we all have, and there are oftentimes, and you may have felt this, Clayt, but especially in the early days of Keap, when we got to create this, we've got mortgages. I heard,
right.
I love the whack-a-mole analogy. Hey, we were paying his mortgage, and then hers, or
right.
his, and then mine, and there's a certain energy that we have when we're driven that pushes things away, that could totally come in to our circle and aid us and assist us, but we're so funneled and so driven that we shove it out. And I can tell you one really interesting scenario. I was cycling across North Dakota, and I was thinking, I've got to make this happen. I've got to do it. If I don't do it, it doesn't happen. We went to church and we met a guy who got really excited. He said, "You're biking across America? I'm going to take you out to eat. You're going to come to my home. I got a gift for you." And went out to eat, went to his home, and he handed me his life story.
Huh.
And he said, "I got really excited about cycling. I got totally impassioned. Most of this you're not even going to care about. But at the end, it chronicles my coast-to-coast journey on a bike.
Huh.
And you'll like that." And as I read through there, I thought, this old guy, he was doing 120 miles a day. I was doing 60. And I thought, what the heck? I have put limits on my mind. I wonder if I could crank that out. Well, a storm blew in at the end of the day, but I cranked out 112 miles that day.
Wow.
And it would never have happened had not he come into my universe and shared with me this connection about something we both had passion about. And if I would have been closed to that, then it never would have happened. But I had to be open and allow the opportunity when somebody reaches out and says, hey, let me give you a gift.
Yeah.
It was up to me to allow that, to allow myself to receive that gift. Otherwise, it was just a book that you stick in the corner and gather dust.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm thinking about our audience as, building businesses as entrepreneurs, having a dream, creating the conditions for that to be successful. They're working at it hard. They're metaphorically plowing that ground and, letting go of things from the past and really leaning into their dreams and working hard at it. And then there's this allowing aspect that you're calling out. And my observation is that the allowing has a lot to do with people and our relationships with people. And what you're calling out is this interaction with this individual. And in this way, you slowed down to hear his story, read his story, and it opened you up to a different level of productivity, a different level of achievement in 112 miles in a day instead of 60. So what would you say to entrepreneurs who are maybe in that place where they are at odds with people as they're trying to grow their business, instead of allowing people to bless their business, be a part of things? I see this a lot of times in the mindset of business owners who see employees as a necessary evil, quote unquote. They wish they didn't have to have any employees. And I think, well, that's going to be really hard to create something amazing with those people that you see as an obstacle or an impediment to what you're trying to accomplish. How else do you see it? That's one example, but how else would you maybe loosen up our listeners' minds as to how they can allow the creation and the building of their business through people? Absolutely.
And I think it goes back to creating the conditions. There is a quote that, my gosh, I think every business ought to have it emblazoned on their front door. It's by the author Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. He said, let's see if I can get it now. If you want to build a ship, don't drum up people to collect wood, and don't assign them tasks and labor, but rather teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. Now, I realize that's one of your principles, one of your keys, which is vision. When you have vision and you share the vision and allow their visions to also play into that vision, you unlock something within. Everybody wants, Daniel Pink called it autonomy, mastery, and purpose.
Mm-hmm.
They want the freedom to master something. And everyone needs an avenue whereby they can master that. And if your business is that avenue and you let them go, they will give you more than 100%, because now you've given them license, you've given them permission to tackle that with all they've got and to unleash their higher, I don't want to say higher self, but like their peak performer.
Yeah. That's, when as you know, when we talk about leadership, it starts with vision, because that's what enrolls people to come be a part of something bigger, and for their purpose to become a part of this bigger purpose. And I love the principles that Daniel Pink calls out, and I've always, there was about 12, 15 years ago We had a problem in our business that was really frustrating me and the senior leaders of the company. And we had a really driven, just awesome young employee. And I was having a conversation, and he got excited about this particular problem. And I remember saying to him, this phrase came out of me while we were having this conversation. It wasn't planned. It just kind of happened as we were having the conversation. But I could see this real problem that we had and this passion that he had. And I said, you know what? I want you to make it your mission to solve this problem for the company. And he got all excited. He was at this place where he wanted a mission. He wanted to go master. Mastery is a really powerful driver for people, as Daniel Pink called out. Mm-hmm. And in that conversation, he got lit up and ignited. And I will never forget how inspiring it was to others around him, myself, leader, when he went and solved a problem because he made it his mission to do that. He wanted to go master this problem. And I've seen that over and over the years. When people make it their mission to do something, and it's their mission, it's not my mission. I actually didn't send him on my mission. We together could see a problem, and we matched up a passion with problem, and someone who was driven and excited and wanted to make a contribution. And then I invited him into that, and boy, he went and made it his mission to solve that problem. And I've seen that happen dozens of times over the years in our business, in other people's businesses. And it requires a certain meeting of the hearts and minds of leaders and the people who are making it happen. And it is what you called out. It's vision combined with a challenge to go master something that brings people's best selves to the table and brings their best work out. And it becomes inspiring to everybody. And then other people see that and they want to go do something and make it their mission. And so that phrase I found is I stumbled upon it many years ago. Make it your mission to do this. And I've tried it sometimes when the right, the combination of factors are not in play, where you have the real purpose and passion for the individual. You've got a real problem that you're going after, and there's a person who is empowered to go do it. You have to have those characteristics before they can take it on as their mission. But boy, when they do, it is so fun and so inspiring. And it's one of the things to this day that gets me excited about doing what we do when I see our people go solve a problem like that.
That is a fantastic story. I love that. And it plays back into when you create the conditions for it, you got a problem, you got somebody who's passionate, and you gave them permission to make it theirs.
Yeah, it's a great way to say it.
I see so often that people are wanting, they're begging for permission to go tackle something, but it's not their job description or it's not their role, and they shy back because they don't believe they have permission to go after it.
Okay, we're going to keep this going, but first a quick message for you. Conquer the Chaos listeners, let me talk to you straight for just a minute. You're running your business and it dominates your mind. It can be very difficult to take a step back and see what's needed to create balance in your business and your personal life, and to create great growth and development and progress in your business and personal life. One of the most powerful ways to gain the perspective that you need is to get away from things and immerse yourself in an environment where you're going to be inspired, where you can see possibilities, where you can create connections, and where you can learn and grow and develop. And I know of no better place for entrepreneurs than Keap's Let's Grow Summit. For years, we ran this conference as just an amazing mecca for entrepreneurship. And then, truth be told, for a few years, we didn't run it. We got back to it last year, and this year we're putting it on, and it is going to be awesome. I am so excited about this, and I want you as our listeners to not miss out on this event. It's going to be November 20th through the 22nd, downtown Phoenix, with the main days being the 21st and the 22nd. You can register for it by going to keap.com/Let's Grow Summit. That's keap.com/Let's Grow Summit. And you can take advantage of our early bird registration pricing, which expires the end of July. So if you are needing a reflection time, an opportunity to take a step back, gain greater perspective, inspiration, and most of all, see what automation, the fifth key to success, can do for your business, then make sure that you attend the Let's Grow Summit. Keap.com/Let's Grow Summit, November 20th through 22nd in Phoenix. I look forward to seeing you there. All right, now back to our chat. So what can we do as leaders to give people permission? Maybe it's ourselves permission at times, and then other people permission, because I think you're right. I think we do get into ruts. We get into certain routines. There's a reason why, to me, rhythm is not rut. There's a different flow to it. There's a magic to it. It's almost musical. That's why I love the term rhythm. How do we give ourselves permission? How do we give others permission and make sure that we're not holding ourselves back that way?
There are a couple of things that I can think of, Clayt. One is, the fascinating thing about rhythm is that you've got to have silence within the rhythm. Silence is, and you'll hear master musicians talk about that a pause or a break is as important as the note. So when we give ourselves permission to have breaks, to not be gunning it all the time, but to have that downtime to just ponder, to just read, to reflect on where we're going, instead of feeling like it's crunch time, there's a fire, I got to put it out. That breath is as important as the action.
Yeah.
And it is action. It's a different type of action.
Yeah, let me say something about that before you go to the second thing.
Yeah.
If I could go tell my younger self one thing about my style of work, what I would tell my younger self is find silence. Because it's easy to say slow down. I heard slow down, slow down, slow down, slow down, and I couldn't even interpret what that foreign language meant. But when I learned silence, when I learned quiet, and I began to actually relish quiet, then I slowed down, and I created space that then produced. My coach says this phrase. Says this phrase: miracles happen in space, and great breakthroughs happen in space. They require silence. They require quiet. And my younger self didn't understand what that asset was. It was something that had to be filled. And I still fall into that rut at times where I'm filling, the quiet. But I've come to appreciate that, and I like the way you're describing rhythm and the silence within that rhythm. And certainly my morning mastery work that I do and that I talk about is that's the key principle that we're seeking in that morning mastery, is silence and quiet before the rush of the day, before the noise of everything else, before everything else starts, finding quiet. And to me, that is one of the most powerful tools in a leader's toolkit, is knowing how to fashion miracles with silence. And so I appreciate that you called that out. Thank you. You were going to say a second thing.
Well, let me piggyback on that if I could. I love that phrase, find silence. That's another one that we ought to have written on our hearts.
Yeah.
That's when the energies that we've been unknowingly pushing away can finally come in. The way I think of it, it's like you've looked outside on a cloudy day when light has pierced through the clouds and you see these shafts of light hitting Earth.
Yeah.
Too many of us are in a frenzy that our brains are constantly in that driven mode, that it's like the storm clouds.
Yep.
And when we find silence, that's when the energies, you could say it, enlightenment, whatever, that finally pierces through the storm that we've created and gives us the very answers we need.
Yep. I love that. And I remember, I want to say something to our audience that is so driven. They're making things happen as entrepreneurs. Their minds are racing 100 miles an hour. I know that. I understand. And myself today can speak to that individual in a way that I couldn't hear it back then. And I'll tell you why I couldn't hear it back then. And I'm saying this because I think some of our listeners are not able to hear what I'm saying and what you're saying. It's that our minds are going so fast. There's so much to do. We've become so accustomed to not enough hours in the day, the chaos that is, that it's become a way of being for us. And we don't know how to identify with this other calm way of being. And in fact, that younger self of mine, some of whom are similar in our audience today, they actually are allergic to it. They repel it. It's actually, it looks suspiciously like lack of production, lack of productivity, and they tell themselves, I told myself, I can't afford to do that. I don't have the time to do that. I can't do that. And I'll tell you where I started to have the breakthrough, and it was about 10, 12 years ago. I think I was just about to, I just turned 40, and I had set aside a day to go work on some long-term planning in our business, and I booked a hotel room to do that so that I could just be in a different space to create differently. I had learned the magic by then of changing up the scenery, doing things differently. And I went and I played an early morning round of golf before going and checking into the hotel room to do this planning work. And I didn't have any tasks on my list. I didn't have any family responsibilities that day. Charisse knew that I was going to go do this work. And I was in a state that I was completely unaccustomed to. And I played the best round of golf in my life to that point. I shot a 78. I had never been in even the low 80s at that point, and I shot about 5 strokes better than I had ever shot before. And I was just on. I was hitting greens with my irons. For people who have played golf, I was hitting every green. It was amazing. I was just playing this incredible round of golf. And I was like floating by the time I got done with this round of golf. I drove to check into this courtyard, Marriott courtyard, where I was doing my planning. I had this amazing day. I had all kinds of breakthroughs. I had this just incredible day. And then a couple of days later, I was in a coaching session with my coach. And I said, Steve, I got to tell you what happened. This was amazing. I shot a freaking 78. I have never shot better than an 83, and I shot a 78. What happened? And then I had this amazing planning day, and he helped me see that I had created space, that miracles happen in space, breakthroughs happen in space. My mind was able to think differently, see differently, act differently. I was able to swing the club differently. I was able to strike the ball different. Everything was different. I had a looseness about me. Yeah. And I felt it while I was playing. I felt loose. Everything was just smooth and easy. The club was doing all the work. I told Steve, I was like, it was like I did my backswing and everything just happened effortlessly. Yeah. And he was like, this is the state that you can get in, and we want to tap into this state. And that's when I started to learn the power of silence, the power of quiet, the power of getting rid of tasks and clearing out things so that I could produce in a different way than the checklists of things that by the way, I still do checklists. It's not like I don't do that, but I found a different mode. And what I hope that my younger self could have heard if I could hear if I was saying that to the younger Clay. And what I hope that our audience could hear is there is a type of productivity that type A driven entrepreneurs can get themselves into. And by the way, this is why I advocate so much about vision and rhythm and getting into this place of rhythm, because you can tap into this mode that I know you have a very deep connection with, that you call it flow. So will you talk to us a little bit about how we tap into that, and as a place of productivity and accomplishment, not as a place of at odds with our day-to-day work?
Yeah. Well, it's part of the creating the conditions. I think that there are two things that everybody should do. One is when they get up in the morning, go outside for exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can get great exercise in a gym, and I'm not flying that. I'm not denigrating it. But there's a magic that happens when you're outside, because you're allowing creation to now play a role in what you're doing, whether it's running, biking, walking, whatever. The elements, they don't care if you're the janitor or the CEO.
That's right.
And learning to harmonize with that instead of fighting it, learning to be at one with that, is essential to flow. The second thing is, I think you can call it meditation, prayer, gospel study, but some sort of immersive experience where you shut everything off. You have nothing on. You put it in. You put your phone and your watch in personal mode, and nobody can reach you. And allow yourself, truly safeguard that experience. Set a timer so you're not trying to just fill the space, but allowing yourself the freedom, giving yourself permission to simply ponder and immerse, really soak in whatever it is you're studying or meditating. And if I can, I'm going to give you a great story about this.
Please, yeah. So to recap, just as you go into the story, the point you're making about getting into flow is we create the conditions for it. We can do that in nature. We can do that with some sort of spiritual immersion, but we're creating conditions that make it possible for us to get into this state of flow, to do a different type of productivity, a different type of accomplishment, a different type of achievement than the checklist-driven, go, ambitious, entrepreneurial-oriented way that we generally, it's kind of our default mode as type A entrepreneurs. So I appreciate how you talked about creating the conditions. I'm excited to hear the story.
Well, it's like getting out of the way and allowing the golf club to get the 78 for you. You get to participate in the process, but now you're not the one doing it. It's like something else is flowing through you. And I'll just pause before the story. A great, fantastic book that taps into that is called Zen in the Art of Archery. Thin little book, 83 pages, phenomenal. Anyway, so I had a client who said, Layne, I don't know that I can join you on this bike trek. I'm an entrepreneur. I am up at 4. I'm on the road at 5. I don't get home till 7. My life does not allow time for any bicycle training. I said, man, let me tell you, this will reward you tenfold if you do it. Well, he said, okay, I'm going to do it. And then on one of our training rides together, we would go at 8 o'clock at night. He was telling me, Layne, I really pride myself on having plan A, plan sub A, and sub B and sub C, and plan B as my backup, and plan sub A and B and C, and plan C and sub. He said, when I make my plans, my business plans, I've got so much going on, and I've got a stack of all the papers, with all the plans. He said, I went to my assistant the other day, and I had that full stack all printed out and everything, and I took the top plan A, And I gave her the rest, and I just threw it on the floor. And I said, we're not going to go with any of that. We're just going to go with plan A. And she freaked out and said, boss, I know you. No, let me at least archive this for us because you're going to want that. Nope. I know that we're going to be enough. All we need is plan A. We'll get through it. Like, we'll pivot if we need to, but just plan A. So he heard her later on shredding the paper. He went on the trek. We went to Croatia and Italy. He came back, and then I called him a year later. And I said, how are things going? He said, Layne, I got to tell you, I'm still working like a mad dog because I work. That's what I do. I love it. But I've told my guys now, I trust you. I want you to go tackle things. Our business has tripled. Like, it is insane how much work we've got. And they are confident and they are loving it because they feel empowered to solve all the problems instead of always coming back to me. I've let go. They have permission. It's go time.
That's awesome. That's amazing. That ability for entrepreneurs to let go, trust their people, create a plan together, but then enable people to do their best work driving on that plan. When I look back over the years and I see times we've done well, that's what we're doing. And when I see times we haven't done so well, we're not doing that. So I appreciate that story. And I appreciate the points you're making about how to get into flow. And I hope that our listeners are wanting to embrace that way of working, not as the only way. There are times to grind. You know,
absolutely.
There are times to grind and there are times to flow. And I imagine when you're on the road, there are grinders where you're driving up a hill and you're just, you're digging. And then there are times to just go with the flow and fly downhill and experience that joy and that rush. And so I appreciate you helping us see the two different modes. And I think that if people are stuck in a grind, I hope that they want to embrace a different way. And you've given some great ways of how to create the circumstances to make that happen. Getting into nature, waking up early, being in silence, embracing that, and trusting that miracles will happen in that space. And to be in that space and be comfortable with that space instead of going and rushing to something else, which is the default way that we tend to do things. Well, this has been fantastic. Are there any other lessons of leadership that you want to leave with us before I give you a chance to tell people where they can learn more about what you do?
Yeah, the number one leadership lesson is listening. Where you listen from will determine everything. Because people want to share. They will divulge what's going on in their hearts and minds and in their work if you listen, if you create space and just listen. And listening isn't just nodding your head while you're thinking about something else or thinking about how you're going to respond. It is listening like you do, where you summarize, you echo back what people said in a way that they feel validated and know that you heard them. Then the defenses that people have, the shields and armor, they melt away and you can really connect person to person rather than supervisor to employee.
Yeah.
You connect on a human level, and that's where creation really can flourish.
I love that. And that's that connection with individuals, with people, where magic happens in terms of results and productivity and growth of the individuals of the business. I appreciate you sharing that. Where can people learn more about you, Layne, if they're interested in your leadership and some of the treks that you do? I know you do two or three pretty amazing treks per year, and you take people of all different sorts, types, lifestyles on these trips, and I've heard amazing things about them. Where can they learn more about you, Layne?
Great. Thanks for giving the chance, Clayt. First of all, let me make a distinction. It is definitely not a trip. It is a 6-month program focused around a week and a half, someplace amazing. But they can go to wayofthehero.com. And I'm also it'll be out by the time this podcast airs, but I've created a coin that connects with the story, a really powerful story about giving permission, so that if somebody wants that, they can get it like $9 or something, and they can get that coin, stick it in their pocket, get it for their teams, to remind that we have permission to move ahead. We have permission. You have permission to master this. You have permission to tackle this problem and make it your mission.
Love it. So wayofthehero.com is where they can go to learn more about what you do in your leadership program that culminates in a week and a half trip.
They can do that. The coin will be at permission.wayofthehero.com.
Okay. Permission.wayofthehero.com. Well, excellent. Thank you for taking us through some of the lessons of leadership, getting into flow, creating the conditions for that success. And, I know that you know this so well, that entrepreneurship can be a grind and we can get into a rut. And sometimes when we get into that, it's preventing us from achieving great results and having great impact on our employees and our customers and our families and communities. And so, for anybody listening, if you're finding yourself a little bit in a long-term grind, open yourself up to an additional way, not the other way, alternative way. It's another way where you can think about different types of productivity. I know my younger self didn't want to embrace that thought because it didn't seem like it was going to be productive, but I now know it is very productive. In fact, it's the most fun kind of productivity, and you need both. You need the grind and you need the flow. And I appreciate you helping people see how they can do that, whether that's nature, getting into nature, creating silence, spiritual immersion, getting out and doing something adventurous. These are all ways to ignite our spirit and get us into a place of creation. And the last thought I'll leave with people is this. Sometimes people will say, leadership is lonely, or they'll say, I motivate my people, but who motivates me? Who leads the leader? And I would just say it's in those moments of silence where you can lead yourself as the leader. You can allow yourself to be led. It's a spiritual process. It's a connecting process. It's a getting into a different place in your mind and your heart. And I want that for our entrepreneurs who are listening, to get into that place of leadership, especially if you find yourself in a place where you've been starved of it for a while. That morning mastery that I recommend, it is magic for getting into that place. And I appreciate you, Layne, and sharing some of your thoughts and ideas here. As you know, the dark side of entrepreneurship can be tough. And to conquer the chaos, it requires these 6 keys to success we've discussed. And in particular, we've talked about rhythm, a little bit about vision, definitely about leadership. And until our next episode, I hope you all will take these thoughts, these ideas that Layne has shared, put them into practice, and get out there and keep growing. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Clay.
Thanks so much for listening. Subscribe right here on YouTube or in your favorite podcast app to make sure that you don't miss a single episode of the Conquer the Chaos podcast. And hey, if you like this episode, let's get this out to more entrepreneurs. We all know that it is not easy to grow a great business and a great life. And so let's get this message out to others. Make sure that you hit the like button, that you comment, and that you share it with others so that we can help other entrepreneurs build a great business and a great life as they conquer the chaos. Keep going, keep serving, and keep growing.